My father handed the company I built to my incompetent brother, Kevin, telling me to accept his leadership or leave. So I walked away, taking my critical knowledge with me. 3 weeks later, the silence broke when Dad called, sobbing as everything collapsed. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence in the boardroom was not peaceful. It was the suffocating quiet of a tomb before the stone is rolled into place. I sat at the mahogany table, my hands clasped so tightly together that my knuckles had turned a translucent white. Across from me sat my father, Arthur, his face unreadable, a mask of aged stoicism that I had spent 34 years trying to decipher. Next to him was my older brother, Kevin, leaning back in his leather chair with a casual, almost bored arrogance that made my stomach churn with a mixture of nausea and rage. "I've made my decision, Amelia," Arthur said, his voice steady, devoid of the tremor one might expect from a man destroying his daughter's life. He didn't look at me. He looked at the paperwork in front of him, smoothing a crease that didn't exist. "Effective the 1st of next month, I am stepping down as CEO." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I had known this day was coming. I had prepared for it. I had spent the last decade running operations, tripling our revenue, modernizing our logistics, and cleaning up every single mess the family business had stumbled into. I was ready. "I'm ready, Dad," I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts to sound commanding. "I have the transition plan for the logistics hub already drafted. We can." Arthur finally looked up, and the pity in his eyes was worse than anger. It was a soft, patronizing look that cut deeper than any knife. "No, Amelia," he interrupted gently. "You misunderstand. Kevin is taking the chair. He's the eldest. It's its tradition. It's the right way." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I looked at Kevin. He wasn't surprised. He was grinning, a lopsided, victorious smirk that told me he had known about this for weeks, maybe months. Kevin, who hadn't shown up to a morning meeting before 11:00 a.m. in 5 years. Kevin, whose networking trips were thinly veiled vacations in Cabo. "Kevin," I whispered, the word tasting like ash. "Dad, Kevin doesn't know how the routing software works. He doesn't know the vendor contracts. Last month he nearly lost the Henderson account because he forgot to sign the renewal." "That's enough," Arthur snapped, his tone hardening instantly. The pity was gone, replaced by the iron wall of patriarchal authority. "He is your brother. He is the future of this company. I need you to support him. I'm moving you to the role of senior advisor. You'll handle the day-to-day grunt work so Kevin can focus on vision." "Vision?" I stood up, my legs trembling. "You want me to be his secretary while he pretends to run the company I saved? I won't do it. I can't do it." Arthur slammed his hand on the table. "You will do it because you are family, because I am your father and I am telling you what is best." "It's not best," I shouted, the years of suppression finally boiling over. "It's suicide for the business." Arthur stood up too, leaning over the table, his face red. "If you cannot accept your place, Amelia, if you cannot support your brother, then you have no place here. Walk away if you don't like it." The ultimatum hung in the air, vibrating with finality. Walk away if you don't like it. I looked at Kevin. He didn't defend me. He didn't offer to share the load. He just checked his watch, as if my devastation was making him late for lunch. I looked back at my father. I saw no hesitation, no regret, just an expectation of obedience. "Okay," I said, my voice suddenly frighteningly calm. "I'll walk." "Don't be dramatic," Arthur scoffed, sitting back down. "You'll be at your desk on Monday." "No," I said, grabbing my purse. "I won't." I turned and walked out of the boardroom, the heavy oak doors closing behind me with a click that sounded like a gunshot. I made it to the elevator before my legs gave out, and I had to lean against the cold metal wall, gasping for air. The betrayal wasn't just about the title or the money. It was the realization that, in his eyes, my competence would never outweigh my brother's gender. The morning after the meeting, the sun rose with an audacity I found personally offensive. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my body heavy with a kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. It was a Tuesday. For the last 12 years, Tuesday meant the weekly operations review, a meeting I led, prepared for, and executed with military precision. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, then again, and again. I roll. Over and looked at the screen. 4 missed calls from Dad and 2 texts from Kevin. Kevin, where are you? The Henderson reps are here early. I don't have the files. Kevin, stop being a brat. Dad is pissed. Get here now. I didn't reply. I didn't feel the panic I usually felt when a crisis loomed. Instead, I felt a strange, cold detachment. I got up, made coffee, and sat by the window. Around 10:00 a.m., my personal cell phone rang. It was Lucy. Lucy was the office manager, a woman in her 50s who had been with the company since before I was born. She was the gatekeeper, the vault of secrets, and the only person in that building besides me who actually worked a full 8-hour day. Amelia, her voice was a hushed whisper, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Lucy," I said, sipping my coffee. "How is it over there?" "It's chaotic," she whispered. "Arthur is pacing the hallway. Kevin is in your office, well, what used to be your office. He's looking for the master credentials for the logistics server. He's shouting at the IT guys, but they're telling him they don't have access." A small, grim smile touched my lips. Of course they didn't. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him that you handled all high-level security protocols personally," Lucy said. "Amelia, Arthur is saying you quit in a tantrum. He's telling everyone you're having a female moment and will be back once you calm down." "I'm not coming back, Lucy," I said softly. There was a long pause on the other end. "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "I saw the look on your face yesterday. But Amelia, the Henderson contract. The renewal deadline is Friday. The automated dispatch system, the encryption keys for the driver payroll, it's all on your encrypted drive, isn't it?" "It is," I confirmed. "They don't know," Lucy breathed. "They have no idea, do they?" "No," I said, looking out at the skyline. "They think the business runs on magic and Kevin's charm. They forgot that I built the engine." "Kevin is telling the staff that he's going to streamline operations today," Lucy warned. "He's talking about firing the shift supervisors because he thinks they cost too much. He doesn't realize those supervisors are the only reason the drivers don't strike." "Let him," I said, though it pained me to say it. I cared about those people. If I step in now, Lucy, if I send one password or answer one question, nothing changes. They'll just take the solution and push me back into the corner. I have to let it happen. "Be careful, honey," Lucy said. "Arthur is getting worked up. He's threatening legal action if you don't show up." "Let him try," I said. "I never signed a non-compete. I never signed an employment contract that stipulated a notice period for the role of unpaid scapegoat. And the software on my laptop? I wrote the code on my own time, on my own device, 3 years ago. It's my intellectual property." But they had forgotten one crucial thing, I whispered to myself after hanging up, watching a bird land on the balcony railing. They forgot that while they were playing golf, I was the one holding the keys to the kingdom. To understand why I didn't just turn the car around and go save them. Because that is what I had been programmed to do since childhood, you have to understand the dynamic between Kevin and me. Kevin was 4 years older. He was the firstborn son, the heir apparent from the moment he drew breath. He was charming, I'll give him that. He had Arthur's jawline and a smile that could disarm a dissatisfied client over a steak dinner. But beneath the polish, he was hollow. In high school, when Kevin was failing algebra, I did his homework. When he crashed his car, I was the one who picked him up so Dad wouldn't find out. When I joined the company at 22, fresh out of business school with honors, it was struggling. We were bleeding money on inefficient routes and outdated tracking. I spent that first summer sleeping on a cot in the warehouse office. I mapped every route by hand until I could afford to build a digital system. I renegotiated vendor contracts. I learned the names of every driver, every packer, every receptionist. Kevin joined 2 years later. His orientation consisted of a tour of the executive suite and a lunch with the VP of sales. There was a specific memory that kept playing in my loop as I sat in my living room. It was from 5 years ago. We had a crisis, a massive recall on a product we shipped. It was a nightmare. I stayed in the office for 72 hours straight, coordinating returns, managing the PR fallout, and soothing angry clients. Kevin had left at 5:00 p.m. on Friday for a weekend ski trip. When the dust settled and we saved the account, Arthur took us both to dinner. He raised a glass and said, "To my children, to Kevin for keeping the team's morale high, and to Amelia for helping out." Helping out. That was the moment the seed of resentment truly took root. I had watered it with silence for 5 years, and now it had bloomed into a forest of thorns. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't family, it was Samantha. Samantha was my best friend since college, and conveniently, a shark of a corporate attorney. "I heard the news," Samantha said, her voice sharp and clear. "Lucy texted me. Are you okay?" "I'm numb," I admitted. "Good, numb is good. Numb keeps you from making emotional mistakes," Samantha said. "Now, listen to me. Do not answer their calls. Do not log into your work email. Do not go to the building. If Arthur shows up at your door, you don't open it." "He threatened legal action," I told her. Samantha let out a dry, dark laugh. "On what grounds?" "Failure to enable nepotism. Amelia, I reviewed your employment status years ago, remember? You're an at-will employee. You didn't steal company property. You left. You resigned effectively immediately due to a hostile change in working conditions. Constructive dismissal if we want to get nasty. But for now, silence is your weapon." "I feel guilty," I whispered. "The employees, the drivers." "Kevin is the CEO," Samantha said firmly. "The employees are his responsibility now. If he fails them, that is on him. Not you. You have been the crutch for that family for too long. If you go back now, you will never, ever be free. They will bleed you dry and leave you with nothing but a thank you for helping out when you're 60. She was right. I knew she was right. "What do I do, Sam?" "You wait," she said. "You wait for the house of cards to fall. Because we both know Kevin can't even operate the coffee machine, let alone a multi-million-dollar logistics firm. It won't take long." She paused and her voice dropped an octave. "But be prepared, Amelia. When Kevin starts to fail, he won't take responsibility. He's going to come for you. He's going to try to destroy your reputation to save his own. That's who he is." I thought of Kevin's smirk in the boardroom. The way he looked at me like I was an annoying appliance that had stopped working. "Let him come," I said, a cold resolve settling in my chest. "I'm not the little sister anymore. I'm the competition." The first week of my retirement was a surreal blur of silence and noise. The silence came from my apartment, which for the first time in a decade wasn't filled with the frantic pinging of dispatch alerts at 3:00 a.m. The noise, however, came from the outside world. Kevin hadn't just stepped into the role of CEO, he had stepped into the role of victim. It started on LinkedIn. I was sipping tea on Thursday morning, enjoying the sunlight hitting my floorboards when a notification popped up. It was a post from Kevin. "Leadership is about making hard choices. Sometimes you have to trim the dead weight to let the eagle soar. Miller Logistics is entering a new era of efficiency. Sad to see some team members go who couldn't handle the new vision, but we move forward. New CEO, visionary growth." Dead weight, that was me. The woman who built the tracking system he was currently failing to operate. I felt a flash of heat in my chest, the urge to type a furious rebuttal, to list every weekend I sacrificed while he was partying in the Hamptons. But Samantha's voice echoed in my head. "Silence is your weapon." I closed the laptop, I didn't need to defend myself on social media. I had something better. I had the key. Later that afternoon, I met Samantha for lunch at a bistro downtown, far enough from the warehouse district that we wouldn't be spotted. She looked impeccable as always, sliding a thick manila folder across the table to me. I reviewed the IP filings from 4 years ago, Samantha said, taking a sip of sparkling water. It's ironclad, Amelia. You wrote the Miller Connect source code on your personal laptop on weekends before you were a salaried executive. You licensed it to the company on a rolling monthly basis for a nominal fee of $1. A contract Arthur signed without reading because he was too busy planning his golf trip. I opened the folder. There it was, my signature and Arthur's scrawled signature. The contract stipulates, Samantha continued, a shark-like grin spreading across her face, that the license must be manually renewed by the licensor, you every 30 days. If not renewed, the software enters read-only mode to protect data integrity, but ceases all processing functions. When does the current cycle end? I asked, though I already knew. This Sunday at midnight, Samantha said. If you don't log in and click renew, the entire logistics network freezes on Monday morning. No new orders, no route optimization, no driver payroll processing. I stared at the document. This was it. This was the leverage. It wasn't a trap I had set with malice. It was a safety measure I had built years ago to ensure I was never made redundant. I had just never expected to actually have to use it. He called me dead way. GHT, I whispered, tracing the edge of the paper. Then let him see how heavy the company is without you carrying it, Samantha replied. But before I could even process the morality of letting the system crash, my phone rang. It wasn't Dad, and it wasn't Kevin. It was Mr. Henderson. Robert Henderson was our biggest client. His manufacturing firm accounted for 40% of Miller Logistics' revenue. He was a no-nonsense man who hated excuses. Amelia, his voice was gravelly and tight. I've been trying to reach the scheduling department for 3 days. I have 20 containers sitting on a dock in Newark, and your brother is telling me there's a system migration happening? What the hell is going on? I took a deep breath. This was the turning point. I could cover for Kevin one last time. I could make a call, smooth it over, save the account for my father's legacy. Mr. Henderson, I said clearly, I don't work for Miller Logistics anymore. There was a stunned silence on the line. Excuse me. I resigned last week, I explained. The new CEO, Kevin, has taken full control of operations. I have no access to the system and no authority to move your containers. You quit, Henderson sounded horrified. Amelia, the only reason I signed that renewal was because you promised me personally that the holiday rush would be handled. I know, I said, feeling a pang of guilt. And I intended to keep that promise, but the leadership decided to go in a different direction. A visionary direction. Henderson swore loudly. I don't care about vision, I care about my freight. If this isn't fixed by Monday, I'm pulling the contract. And Amelia. Yes. If you land somewhere else, let me know. I follow competence, not company names. He hung up. I looked at Samantha. She was smiling. That, she said, sounded like a job offer. No, I said, a plan finally forming in the back of my mind. Not a job offer, a client. Sunday came and went. I did not log in. I did not click renew. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a tidal wave. I was in my living room, sketching out a business plan for an independent logistics consultancy when the pounding started. It wasn't a knock. It was a physical assault on my front door. I checked the peephole. It was Kevin. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His tie was undone, his expensive suit looked rumpled, and his hair, usually gelled to perfection, was a chaotic mess. I opened the door, leaving the security chain on. Open the damn door, Amelia, Kevin screamed, his face flushed a blotchy red. Hello, Kevin, I said calmly. To what do I owe the pleasure? The system is down. he shouted, spit flying from his mouth. Everything is red. The drivers can't log their hours, the routing map is blank, and Henderson is threatening to sue us for breach of contract. Fix it. I can't fix it, I said. I don't work there. Don't give me that crap. He tried to shove the door, but the chain held. Dad told me you did this. You put a virus in the system before you left. That's a felony, Amelia. I'll have you arrested. It's not a virus, I said, my voice icy. It's a license expiration. You're the CEO, Kevin. Surely you reviewed the software licensing agreements when you took over. He blinked, confused. What license? It's our software. You built it for us. I built it, I corrected. And I licensed it to Miller Logistics. The contract requires monthly renewal by the administrator. Since you fired the administrator, me, and didn't appoint a new one with the proper credentials, the license expired. Give me the password, he demanded, his voice dropping to a growl. Give me the admin login and I won't press charges. I laughed. I actually laughed. It felt amazing. You won't press charges? Kevin, you have no grounds. And I'm not giving you the password because that software is my intellectual property. If you want to use it, we need to negotiate a new contract. My consulting rate is $300 an hour with a minimum retainer of $50,000. You're insane, he hissed. You're trying to destroy the family. You destroyed it when you accepted a job you aren't qualified for, I shot back. You wanted the title, Kevin. You wanted the big chair. Well, the chair comes with responsibilities. Fixing this is your job. Dad is going to kill you, he said, pointing a shaking finger at me through the crack in the door. He's on his way to the office now. He's going to ruin you. Tell him to drive safely, I said, and slammed the door in his face. I locked the deadbolt and leaned against the wood, my heart racing. I expected to feel fear. Instead, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had finally said no. But Kevin's reaction, the immediate leap to threats and lies, confirmed everything Samantha had warned me about. He wasn't just incompetent, he was malicious. And he was desperate. Why was he so desperate? Sure, a system crash was but his level of panic seemed disproportionate. Miller Logistics had cash reserves. We could weather a few days of downtime, manually route trucks, and pay the fines. But Kevin acted like the world was ending instantly. I went back to my laptop and pulled up the public records for the county clerk's office. If Kevin was hiding something, it would be in the money. I started searching for recent filings under Kevin's name. Nothing. Then I searched for Miller Logistics assets. And there it was, a lien. Filed 3 months ago, a lien against the company warehouse for an unpaid loan. A loan that Arthur, to my knowledge, had never authorized. I dug deeper. The loan wasn't for business expansion. It was a high-interest, short-term bridge loan from a private equity firm known for predatory lending. The signatory. Kevin Miller, acting CFO. My blood ran cold. He had been siphoning money or leveraging company assets before he was even CEO. He didn't just need the job for the ego, he needed the control to cover his tracks. The discovery of the lien changed everything. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore, this was corporate malfeasance. If that loan defaulted, the bank wouldn't just take the trucks, they would take the warehouse, the land, and my parents' retirement, which was tied up in company stock. I called Lucy. Amelia, it's a madhouse, she whispered, picking up on the first ring. Henderson just pulled his contract. He sent a courier with the termination letter an hour ago. Kevin is in his office throwing things, literally throwing things. Lucy, listen to me, I said, my voice urgent. I need you to check the physical file cabinet in Dad's old office. The bottom drawer, back, under capital expenses. Check if there's a loan agreement with Apex Capital. Apex, Lucy paused. I've never heard of them, we use First National. Just check, please, and take a picture if you find it. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a photo of a document. A loan agreement for $500,000 secured against the primary distribution center. The interest rate was astronomical. The funds had been deposited into an account I didn't recognize. I traced the routing number online. It wasn't a company vendor. It was an account in the Cayman Islands. My brother wasn't just incompetent, he was embezzling. I sat there, staring at the screen, realizing the magnitude of what I held. I could go to the police. I should go to the police, but Arthur, my father, if I went to the police, the scandal would kill him. He was a proud man, and finding out his golden boy was a criminal might induce a heart attack. I had to give them one last chance. Not for Kevin, but for the company that I had spent my life building. I texted Arthur, "Meet me at the office. 2:00 p.m., I know about the loan." He didn't reply, but I knew he would be there. At 1:55 p.m., I walked into the building I had practically lived in for 12 years. The atmosphere was funereal. The phones were ringing off the hook, but the staff just looked defeated. When they saw me, hope flared in their eyes. "Amelia," the shift supervisor Mike ran over. "Thank God, are you back? The drivers are sitting in the lot, they don't know where to go." "I'm sorry, Mike," I said gently. "I'm just here for a meeting." I walked into the boardroom. Arthur and Kevin were there. Kevin looked pale, sweating profusely. Arthur looked furious, his face a mask of thunder. "You have some nerve," Arthur spat as I entered. "Sabotaging the system and then blackmailing your brother." "I didn't sabotage anything," I said, tossing a folder onto the table. "And I'm not here to talk about the software. I'm here to talk about Apex Capital." The color drained from Kevin's face so fast I thought he might faint. Arthur frowned. "Apex? Who is Apex?" "It's the predatory lender Kevin borrowed $500,000 from, using the warehouse as collateral," I said, pointing at Kevin. "Tell him, Kevin. Tell Dad where the money went." "She's lying," Kevin screamed, standing up. "She forged it. She's trying to frame me because she's jealous." "I have the bank records, Kevin," I lied. "I didn't have the bank records yet, only the loan, but he didn't know that. I know about the offshore account." Arthur looked at Kevin, then at me. For a moment, I thought he saw it. I thought the veil had lifted. He looked at his son, seeing the sweat, the panic, the guilt. But then the old habit kicked in. The lifetime of favoring the son, the refusal to admit he was wrong. Arthur turned to me, his eyes cold. "If Kevin took a loan, it was for the business. He has vision, Amelia. Sometimes you have to take risks. You wouldn't understand that because you're too cautious. You're just an administrator." I stared at him, stunned. "Dad, he didn't put the money in the business. The vendors aren't paid. The maintenance budget is empty. He stole it." "Stop it," Arthur roared, slamming his fist down. "I will not have you slander your brother in this room. You are jealous because I chose him. This entire charade, the software, this loan story, it's all just a tantrum because you didn't get the crown." He took a breath, straightening his tie. "Now you will unlock the system. You will apologize to Kevin, and you will sign over the rights to that software to the company immediately. If you don't, I will cut you out of the will completely. I will make sure you never work in this industry again." I looked at my father. I really looked at him. I saw a man so desperate to believe in his fantasy of a dynasty that he was willing to let the reality burn to the ground. He would rather lose the company than admit his daughter was right and his son was a thief. The last tether of loyalty snapped. It didn't snap with a bang, but with a quiet, peaceful release. "You don't have to cut me out, Dad," I said softly. "I'm already gone." I looked at Kevin, who was smirking again, thinking his father's protection had saved him one last time. "You win, Kevin," I said. "You can have the company, you can have the loan, you can have the mess, but you can't have me to fix it." "Unlock the system," Arthur commanded as I turned to the door. "No," I said, "the contract is expired, and I'm not renewing it." I walked out. Behind me, I heard Arthur shouting, but his voice sounded small, distant, like a ghost in a machine that had already been turned off. I walked to the elevator, took out my phone, and called Mr. Henderson. "Robert," I said, "about that job offer. I have a better idea. How would you like to be the first client of Amelia Vance Logistics?" I thought you'd never ask, he replied. 3 weeks, that was all it took for 40 years of legacy to turn into ash. In those 3 weeks, my life had transformed. Vance Logistics wasn't just a registered LLC, it was a phenomenon. With Henderson's backing and my reputation in the industry, clients who were fleeing the sinking ship of Miller Logistics were knocking on my door. I was working 18-hour days, operating out of a leased industrial park suite that smelled of fresh paint and ambition. I was tired, yes, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying a burden I didn't own. I was building a ladder that I would climb, not holding it steady for someone else. But while I rose, the silence from the other side of town was deafening. I hadn't spoken to Arthur or Kevin since I walked out of that boardroom. I blocked their numbers. I returned their emails unread. I needed the distance to heal, to scrub the feeling of inadequacy from my skin. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the silence broke. I was in the middle of onboarding a new fleet of drivers, men and women who had resigned from Miller's that morning because their paychecks had bounced when my personal cell rang. It was a landline number I recognized. My childhood home. I stared at the screen. Samantha would tell me to let it go to voicemail. My pride told me to let it ring. But my heart, that treacherous, foolish thing that still remembered being a little girl looking up to her daddy, made me answer. Hello. Amelia. The voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the booming baritone of Arthur Miller, the titan of industry. It was a jagged, wet rasp, a sound of total defeat. He let it burn, Arthur sobbed. Amelia, he let it all burn. Dad, I sat down, signaling my assistant to close the door. What happened? The bank, he choked out, the tears flowing freely now, a sound I had never heard in 34 years. Apex Capital, they called the loan. Kevin, he defaulted. They're here, Amelia. They're at the warehouse with the marshals. They're locking the doors. They're seizing the trucks. I told you, I said, my voice trembling. I told you about the loan. I didn't want to believe it, he wept. I couldn't believe it, but today the police are looking for him. He's gone, Amelia. Kevin is gone. He took the cash from the safe, he took the corporate cards, and he ran. He left me here to face them. A cold chill went through me. Kevin hadn't just failed, he had fled. He had abandoned his own father to face criminal negligence charges and financial ruin. Where are you? I asked. I'm at the warehouse, Arthur whispered. I'm watching them put chains on the doors. The employees, they're screaming at me. They want their money. I have nothing, Amelia. He leveraged the house too. I signed papers. I didn't read them. I trusted him. Stay there, I said, grabbing my keys. I'm coming. I didn't go to save the company. The company was dead. I went because, despite everything, he was my father, and I wouldn't let him face the mob alone. When I pulled up to the Miller Logistics headquarters, it was a scene of chaos. Police cruisers with flashing lights blocked the entrance. A crowd of angry drivers, warehouse staff, and confused vendors had gathered in the parking lot. In the center of it all Stu. D. Arthur, looking small and frail in his gray suit, surrounded by people shouting demands for their severance, their back pay, their dignity. I parked my car and pushed through the crowd. Let me through, excuse me. It's Amelia, someone shouted. The tone wasn't angry, it was hopeful. Amelia's here. The crowd parted. I walked into the eye of the storm. Arthur was standing by the main glass doors, which were now adorned with a bright orange SEIZD notice. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Amelia, he breathed, reaching out as if to touch a ghost. You came. I'm here, Dad, I said, stepping between him and the angry shift supervisor who was shouting about his rent. Everyone, please back up. We want our money, Amelia. Mike, the supervisor, yelled, though his eyes pleaded for help. Checks bounced, 2 weeks of work for nothing. I know, I shouted, raising my hands. I know, and I promise you, I am going to do everything I can to help. But screaming at an old man who has lost everything isn't going to put cash in your accounts. He's the owner, someone yelled. He's a victim too, I said, the words tasting bitter but true. He was deceived. Suddenly, the side door of the office burst open. 2 police officers dragged a struggling figure out into the rain. It was Kevin. He hadn't made it far. He was wearing a hoodie and carrying a duffel bag that was spilling open, revealing stacks of petty cash. "Get off me," Kevin screamed, thrashing against the handcuffs. "It's not my fault, it's her fault. She locked the system. She sabotaged the revenue." The crowd went silent as they dragged him past us. Kevin saw me. He stopped struggling for a second, his eyes wild with malice. "You did this," he spat at me. "You jealous witch. You couldn't stand that he picked me." I looked at him feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just pity. "He didn't pick you, Kevin," I said, my voice carrying over the silence of the parking lot. "He picked a fantasy, and you were never strong enough to carry it." Arthur watched his son, his golden heir, being shoved into the back of a police car like a common thief. He let out a low, guttural moan and collapsed. I caught him before he hit the asphalt, holding the weight of the man who had told me I wasn't strong enough to lead. The fallout was swift and brutal. Kevin was denied bail. The forensic accounting revealed a web of fraud that went back years: gambling debts, shell companies, and the unauthorized loan from Apex. He was facing 10 to 15 years in prison. Miller Logistics filed for Chapter 7 liquidation. The assets, the trucks, the scanners, the office furniture were auctioned off to pay the creditors. The building was sold to a developer. Arthur lost his house. The papers Kevin had tricked him into signing were personal guarantees on the business loans. At 70 years old, my father was homeless and bankrupt. I spent the next month navigating the wreckage. I didn't have to. I could have focused on Vance Logistics and left them to rot, but I needed closure. I hired Samantha to represent Arthur in the civil suits, ensuring he wouldn't go to jail for Kevin's crimes. I bought a small, 1-bedroom condo in a quiet neighborhood and moved Arthur into it. It wasn't the sprawling estate he was used to, but it was safe. One rainy Saturday, a month after the arrest, I went to visit him. The condo was sparse. He sat in a recliner I had bought him, staring out the window at the street below. He looked 20 years older. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a hollow haunting. I made tea and set it on the table beside him. "Kevin's lawyer called," I said softly. "They're trying to cut a plea deal. He wants to testify that you were the mastermind behind the Apex loan in exchange for a reduced sentence." Arthur flinched, closing his eyes. He would do that after I gave him everything. "He's scared, Dad," I said, "and he's selfish. He's always been selfish. You just never wanted to see it." Arthur turned to look at me. His hands were trembling as he picked up the tea. "I saw it," he whispered. "Deep down, I think I always saw it. I knew he was lazy. I knew he wasn't sharp like you." "Then why?" I asked, the question that had burned in my soul for a lifetime. "Why did you give it to him? Why did you push me aside?" Arthur took a long, shaky breath. "Because I was afraid," he admitted. "I was afraid of being the man whose son was a failure. In my generation, a man passes his name to his son. If Kevin failed, I failed, I thought. If I gave him the title, the responsibility would make him a man. I thought if I put you there to support him, you would carry him, and no one would have to know he was weak." He looked at me, tears spilling over his cheeks again. "I sacrificed you to save my ego, Amelia. I broke the strong child to prop up the weak one, and look what He got me." He gestured around the small room. "I have nothing. I am a fool." I looked at this broken man. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that he deserved this. But looking at his grief, I realized that his punishment was far worse than anything I could say. He had to live the rest of his life knowing that he destroyed his own legacy because of his prejudice. "You don't have nothing, Dad," I said, reaching out and covering his hand with mine. He looked up surprised. "I bought the fleet," I said. He blinked. "What?" "The auction," I explained. "Vance Logistics bought the core fleet of trucks yesterday. and I hired back Mike, Lucy, and 80% of the driving staff. They're working for me now. The Miller name is gone, Dad. It's never coming back. But the work, the people, the standard of service, that survived. I saved it. Arthur began to weep openly, bowing his head over our joined hands. I don't deserve you, he sobbed. I don't deserve your kindness. No, I said firmly. You don't, but I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I am good at my job. I'm doing it because I am the CEO that company needed, whether you saw it or not. I stood up and walked to the door. Amelia, he called out. I turned back. I am so proud of you, he whispered. I should have said it 10 years ago. You are the only true Miller left. I'm not a Miller anymore, Dad, I said gently. I'm a Vance, and Vance Logistics has a very busy week ahead. I left the condo and walked out into the cool afternoon air. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Henderson. Contract signed for the new distribution center. Congratulations, partner. I smiled, looking up at the sky. The clouds were clearing. The weight was gone. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away from the past, heading straight toward the empire I was building on my own terms.